The Miami News called me the longest of long shots, if they only knew the rest of the story. Today, I want to let you know that I'm blessed to have been married for over 18 years, and I'm very proud of my film roles. But my most important role in life is that of father to my 14-year-old son, Eli, who, by the way, has been speaking out on issues of family violence and child abuse since he was 5 years old. And as a matter of fact, when Eli was 5.5, we had been invited to the Oval Office to meet with President Bill Clinton. And of all the things that my 5.5-year-old son could have asked President Clinton for, I don't know, like a national PlayStation Day, he looked up at President Clinton and he said, "You need to reauthorize the Violence Against Women Act." I'm very proud of my brothers and sisters who are all living safe, happy, productive lives, and are also loving parents. My mom, my mother, she's now retired, and she's surrounded by her children and numerous grandchildren. If there's anything right to be found, a solution to be found that what went right in that household, that had to come from my mother, who in her own quiet, humble, and dignified way was able to instill a sense of goodness and resilience in all of us, because we've all broken the cycle of violence. I'm also very grateful that my mother has encouraged me to share our story, because she feels as I do, that if we can save one person, a woman, a child, a man, anyone, from being subjected to the torture that was our life, then whatever loss of privacy we experience would be worth it. Now, I told you before that one of the reasons that I speak is because of a boy I know, and of course that boy was me. But there's another boy I'd like to tell you about, who's an even more important reason why I'm involved, a boy whose life was short and tragic. My mother was battered viciously while she was pregnant with my brother Robert. I was 6.5, almost seven years old when I witnessed my father drop kicking my mother in her stomach in her 9th month. I jumped on his back to pull him off, but it was too late. The damage had been done. When my brother Robert was born, he was developmentally disabled to such a degree that he was immediately institutionalized, a victim of my father's brutality. It took me many years to find out what really happened to Robert and to learn that he did not live past the age of 9. At the time of his death, he had left a horrific state hospital setting back then and was being cared for in a residential facility. Now, it is my prayer along the way that Robert was cared for by angels and advocates who are out there today working in the trenches in many different disciplines, all as a part of the movement to end and prevent all forms of abuse. For anyone listening who has been an angel to others, whether in social services, in the fields of health, as a teacher, law enforcement, as a lawmaker, in the corporate or private sector, or even in the media, I want to thank you. You have completely changed the landscape for families like mine. No longer is violence against a woman and her children considered to be a private family matter. Today, as you know, there are shelters and hotlines and counseling and medical services and innovative programs that search for new answers to old problems, along with public awareness campaigns that have begun to get the message across that love should never hurt. And that's the good news. Here's the bad news, is that domestic violence, family violence, continues to be the most underreported crime in America, what is often referred to as the quiet crime, because it thrives in an atmosphere of shame, denial, and silence. That's why I believe the number one most important step in breaking the cycle of violence that we know is inflating during economic stress is to do more to break the silence about this issue. It's a simple first step. We need to talk more about how it affects all of us. We need to be proactive rather than reactive and not wait for the crisis of a death or an assault. When I first told people I was speaking on the issue of domestic violence, some of them would say, are you for or against it? And they would laugh to let me know that they were joking, because who would actually admit to being for domestic violence? That's the good news. I mean, it truly is a bipartisan issue. But when I hear people making comments like that, it's like them saying, how does this affect me? Why should I care? And do we really have to talk about this? I think we do. In fact, I think that especially with our economic crisis, we have an opportunity to approach some of our most pressing issues with a renewed spirit of collaboration and innovation. I can feel here in this setting and everywhere I go that the era of business as usual is over. And the era of, hey, that's not my problem, is over. Everywhere I go, I'm encouraged by the attitude that we're all in this together, and that we really do have a movement that is including not only more men, but also great support from businesses and the private sector, who know the terrible toll that, and the sheer cost in the billions of dollars that domestic violence takes on the workplace. Now, more and more, I see communities working together to connect the dots, not just how the cycle of violence touches us all, but also at the connection between the issues of domestic violence, child abuse, sexual assault, elder abuse, the abuse of individuals with disabilities, or any form of violence. And in fact, There is a connection between those violations and the violence that we fear on our school campuses, on our streets, and in our world. And I believe that it's when we can connect the dots and recognize the cycle, that's when we'll know how to end it. And that is the big question I hear most frequently from people. They'll say, how were you able to break the cycle of violence? Well, my first answer has to do with those advocates who sent me the message that I was worth investing in and who helped me find my own survival toolbox. I offer these as tools that may be helpful no matter what kind of crisis may be encountered. One tool, for example, came from my faith in a higher power, my belief that God had a better plan for me and my family. For any individual, adult, youth, or child who must leave an abusive, oppressive relationship, faith in one's own inner powers to stand alone is an essential. For anyone leaving the war zone of family violence, the ability to trust and the courage to ask for help in making that transition is also an article of faith, and that's why I like to call those who intervene on my behalf, I like to call them angels. So how do you earn the trust from a kid or someone who's been let down before? Well, in my case, some gave me guidance, some gave me shelter, but some just gave me the great gift of lending me their ears, of just listening to me. Talking and being heard are fundamental in healing the wounds of abuse and in surviving the challenges of uncertainty. I also found that humor was a vital outlet. What was going on in my household at times was so crazy that only a good sense of humor could have saved me. I mean, was it funny that my father would tell me, run to the bathroom, get the tube of Bengay, so I could rub it on his sore muscle so he could better beat the hell out of me? No, but it was a strong clue that what he was doing wasn't normal. As a child, I was often punished and required to spend long periods of time isolated in my bedroom. So to entertain myself, I would act out these hilarious adventure stories where I would practice dying in hundreds of different ways. Who knew? That it would be great training for all the roles I would later take on as an actor. Having a sense of humor is a human necessity, but so is the ability to cry. I remember the first time my mom heard me tell our story publicly. For years as a survivor, she had lost the ability to cry about the past. She said, "Ay, hijo, I have no more tears left." But that was disproved that day, and she had a real cleansing, a real catharsis. For survivors and advocates, and especially tough boys like me, who were hurt more when they shed tears, I believe we all have to be able to cry. So having advocates, faith, talking, listening, finding a sense of humor, using imagination, having the ability to cry, these were all tools in my box. Organized athletics gave me a necessary, healthy outlet for my rage. And I mentioned this as one of those connecting the dots concerns because it really concerns me that in our budget-crunching times, more and more free sports programs, music programs, arts programs, dance programs are being eliminated. It is wrong that our public schools have to raise money every year just for basic supplies or to keep their teachers with nothing left over for electives, which might be the one place, where a young person can find that missing self-esteem. This is glaring, but it's also an opportunity for public and private partnerships to create a solution. So what organized sports and athletics and other positive outlets do is you get to feel like a winner and a champion when life isn't otherwise sending that message enough. So what messages are being sent? In homes where domestic violence and child abuse take place, what begins there has a way of spreading. What begins in a home with someone being bullied by someone that's bigger than they are can make that hurt kid angry. And then sometimes that kid comes to school and he becomes a bully. And then sometimes the kid who's being bullied shows up at school with a gun. To seek revenge is what we've seen way too often in this country. This domino effect has led me to conclude that the best way to honor all victims of violence is by taking a stand against all violence. When I was working on a film called Blood In, Blood Out, which we shot in San Quentin, a maximum security prison in Northern California, I looked out at many of the prisoners in San Quentin and I said, "They're but for the grace of God." The overwhelming majority of individuals in prison in our country started out as victims or witnesses to family violence. A recent study said the nationwide statistic right now for men, 94% or higher. Similar studies said the only other common denominator is illiteracy. 7 out of 10 inmates have minimal reading and writing abilities. And the worst statistic that I saw is that, and this is very recently, 1 in 100 Americans are now incarcerated. And it is costing state governments $50 billion a year. Now, I spent several weeks in San Quentin in the prison population, and I can assure you that from my observations, rehabilitation in prison doesn't work. We can't keep spending billions of dollars to lock people away when we should be doing is spending our money to better educate, better protect, and better equip individuals early in their lives. Now, there are no one-size-fits-all solutions to these very complex problems, but I believe that intervention and prevention work, and it takes so little to make a difference.